Got a big sign here. Angus, have you done that or not? Oh, I can't hear you, Angus. You're on mute. Okay, I'm going to...
Yes. All I'm saying is that you're recording now. It should work.
Yeah, okay. All right. I might do your announcement as you say, Angus. So this is week 2 of Republic Winter 2020. And it's the 20th of July. And we're now getting on to the reading from week 1, which we missed out before. But did anyone, so I need to welcome Helen, who wasn't here last week, but people would know Helen from maybe from the classes earlier in the year, and also Paloma. Paloma's also couldn't manage last week, so it's good to see Paloma as well. Okay, so you guys got any questions about that first 4 books or 3.5 books? No? Okay. All right. Okay. So in the readings this week, I think there's quite a few lists, and I could have put them up on PowerPoints, but I just let it float over you a bit. I don't think the lists are that important. And the first list we start with is the 4 cardinal virtues, which people think it's the first time they appear in our tradition, in the record, but they think that they're traditional virtues. So Socrates refers to the virtues that society should aspire to, which are wisdom, courage. Remember, sometimes the translations might be a bit different. Wisdom's the first one, courage, discipline or temperance, it's sometimes translated as, and the last one is justice. So he thinks, okay, well, if I can work it, we can work out all these are, we can see exactly where justice fits in. So that's how the narrative goes. And so wisdom is what needs to be awakened through the education. So we've dealt with this a bit before in the Phaedo and so on. And wisdom's especially what the guardians need to attain. All right, and we'll get into Sophia and Philosophia, wisdom and the love of wisdom later tonight. So courage is about judgment about danger, and it needs to be strong, like a good dye in a cloth. It doesn't wash out through pursuit of pleasure, through fear, or through desire. And this, of course, is the courage, the auxiliaries. So there is now this separation a bit between the rulers, who are a bit older generally and a bit cleverer or whatever, or have more aptitude for the philosophy, and the auxiliaries. So they're the ones that really need the courage. And then there's this temperance discipline thing, and that's a mastery of your desires and appetites. So this has always been a really important thing in Plato, keeping your desires and your appetites, and keeping all that stuff under control. Very important for Plato. And this is all about everything fitting together, the unity of society where the best unites with the worst. So wisdom unites with desire, lowly desires, and brings the whole of society and also the psyche, in fact, it's very similar, into harmony. So this leaves the last one. He's up to the last one, which is justice. And here we get the definition of justice. So maybe we should all go home after this. Justice, Socrates says, is doing the job that you're naturally suited to and doing it well. So justice is about doing your job and minding your own business, not interfering with other things. So doing your trade or being a good ruler or being a good auxiliary, but if you're an auxiliary, not trying to be a good ruler, and that sort of thing. So it's all about people staying in their place and minding their own business. So justice really is about, if people do that, then there's harmony. He uses like music, metaphor, and health. So he used like bodily health metaphor there. So that's what justice is, according to Plato. Right, and I'll keep going now, so we can, if you've got something to talk about, say about that, then take a note, because now we're going into something else which a lot of people in the Middle Ages and more recently make a big fuss of, and this is the tripartite soul, or the tripartite psyche. Okay, and I sort of say, well, it's interesting to think about. I wouldn't take it too seriously, too concrete, because when you actually read it, I don't necessarily think it's like that. It's a way of thinking about the way you think about things, reflecting on the way you think about things and the way you behave. Okay. So what he does here in the narrative is he returns to the comparison between personal justice, the justice within, and the social justice. So social justice has just been kind of defined. Everyone does what they're good at, and their minds are in business. And now he's going back into justice within. Okay, so and this is kind of coming back in the narrative. You might remember when we started how he got into social justice in the first place. He said, well, what is justice? You know, if we want to know what the justice is within the individual, and what it is in itself, and then what it is in the individual, then we probably can find it by looking at justice writ large, justice in society. And we can see now why he does this when we get to this stage. So what is justice in the person? And this is where he brings up the three parts of the soul and their harmony. So the three parts are, in translation, reason or logos, desire, appetite. So kind of like your, just think of appetites and your desire, sexual desire, and that sort of thing. And what I'm going to do now is share the screen. So here we go. Share. Right, and we'll go back up here. And wow, Bernie's done it. Fantastic. So I found this ages ago when we did our first class covering this last year. I found this on the internet, this image, and I don't know what the source is, so I do apologize to the person who made it. I think it's really good. It gives you a nice picture. So there's so the first thing is the rational, logical. Then there's down the bottom is the appetites, the physical desires. Now in the middle is the kind of the tricky one, the one that people find hard to translate and hard to kind of work out what it is. So, yeah, the Greek word is thumos, and it's related to, some people translate it even as heart soul. And it's kind of like a willfulness. Sometimes it's translated as anger or indignation. So its motivation is not for an object, but to change it. So it's the motivation that you have when you're resisting responding to a desire, a lowly desire. So that was one of the examples that Socrates uses in the narrative. So you have this response, like it's a sexual response or a response on hunger or whatever else, and then you resist that, and that's the spirit or indignation, or the thumos. Okay, so maybe I'll leave that screen up there and you can reflect on that. And so it's then, how does this relate to justice in society? So he relates this division of the soul. So he kind of says, well, look, society is the individual writ large, and you have, if you have good justice in the individual and you train that through the education system and the social structures and everything, and then you also will get a similar sort of structure in the macro. So it's micro, macro sort of thing. So reason in the soul is related to the rulers, the philosopher kings, and to the virtue of wisdom. So the spirit, the thumos, the indignation is related to courage and related to the auxiliaries. And then the lowly desires are what are expressed in the ordinary citizens and need to be brought into balance and control. So this is this whole mind your own, it all comes together with the mind your own business, do what you're skilled with. The individual needs to be in this harmony and this health, and so also the republic needs to have this healthy system. And this all needs to be work in unison. And again, when we're thinking, this is what government's about in the society, and it's, you know, it's much more than just legislations. It's also keeping the social systems working. And then, and so you have good, healthy citizens, and then you have a good, healthy society. They need to be in line. So in summary, reason, wisdom, the rulers have it, spirit, courage, that's the auxiliaries keeping, serving the rulers, serving what the rulers direct for society, and then you know, you've got society at large. So that's already, we've got a pretty clear picture now of Plato's ideal society. So, and that was the first week's reading. So we'll take some questions and comments about that now. So about the psychosocial stuff, the 3 parts of the soul.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
The desire appetite is in Greek the thymos part of the spirit.
Oh, did I get that wrong?
No, that's a question mark. Like I asked that as a question because I would like to know what the Greek words for the other 2 are, if you have them handy.
Oh, I don't have.
Epithemia.
Which
For
the spirited, emotional.
No, that is thymos or thymoides, but for desire or appetite, there are 2 words that at least he is using.
Sorry, Maria, can you repeat that? So the thymos, what's the longer version of that?
Thymoides.
Right.
And that's the spirits and the energy. And for desire or appetite, there are two words. Idoni, which is more the pleasure, and epithemia, which is the desire, as you know, it is used in that connotation as well.
Great, right, and then reason. I'm pretty sure reason is usually says logos.
Logos, yes.
Yeah. So reason is the logos. Okay, thanks for that, Maria. That's great.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you.
Greeks and non-Greeks here. Yeah, that's wonderful.
For everything she knows.
Oh,
the Greeks should put the mute back on now, right, Benny?
No, that was good.
did you hear what the Scot said?
The Scot? No, I didn't. Can you repeat that?
He taught me everything I know. I rest my case. Yeah.
Yes, all in Celtic. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone got any comments about or questions about this 3-part soul business or anything else? So can we kind of, do people kind of understand what he's getting at to saying that it has different parts? Like how, I don't know, I think about it and I sort of go, okay, so you reflect on the way you think about something and you can kind of see how you're reasoning about it. And then, oh yeah, but I'm really hungry, you know, I shouldn't have the cake, and, you know, so you can kind of see, can people kind of see how these sorts of things are working inside them when they're thinking about things? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there is. I see that the bit in between
So
your head and your heart is what you do is the tension between those two elements.
The head and the heart. Yeah.
So is this Plato's idea of his Plato's philosophy or utopia, the three parts of utopia?
Well, I think what he's saying, are we right? I think what he's saying, I'm getting some echo there. But
Yeah, someone's echoing, so just maybe mute if you can.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry. That's that's a bit authoritarian, but I'll keep going. What is this? He's saying this is actually the nature of the psyche. It has these three parts, and he wants to then relate those three parts to society and show how it has kind of similar parts, similar dynamics going on. And he wants to actually reflect them. So he wants to say, okay, the logos, right? The reason part, that's boss. That's the rule, the reason rules. And it uses the heart to keep the lowly desires in control, that sort of thing. Okay, do people want to unmute now, and we'll see if it's okay? So is that clear, Kula?
Yes. Can I just say, if you're muted and you want to say something, you just press the space bar.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yep.
We just
If you're muted and you want to say something, just press the space bar, which I'm doing now, and I'm about to release the space bar.
Ah. Thank you. Thank you. It works.
Now you're muted, Bernie.
Yeah, no, I'm not, but I got some screen up on. Okay. So I'm not muted now. All right. So yeah. Any other comments about that that three-part soul, and if it kind of makes sense? What I was just going to say before someone comments is how does it relate? How do people relate to chakras? Chakras in the Hindu tradition, or ego, which you might know in the Freudian.
Buddhist, yeah, and Buddhist. Yeah, I was going actually to say that the tripartite soul, it's so much like body, spirit, and mind, and that actually representation, it's you can almost see the chakras. All right, there are some missing, but the main one, I suppose, were there, and the correlation is amazing. Actually, it's yeah.
I can see it in today's in what's happening today in our own society, where we have the governments are sort of trying to maintain good fiscal policies. They're showing compassion towards the people with the pandemic, and they're also providing for them. So, what would Plato smile if he looked upon today's democracies?
There's a question. There's a question. And before we answer that, we're going to get on to bad societies later on, right towards the end, where democracies devolves into tyranny.
I just wanted to say he might laugh or cry. It's hard to tell from here.
Yeah, Kula, I think it is interesting the way Australia responded to the global financial crisis, and then the way they responded to this. I think they did take those things into consideration, because there would have been an outrage, you know, like has been in other countries like Bolivia and other places, taking those considerations in terms. So yeah, I can see what you're talking about. All right. Anyone else want to have some comments about that stuff? Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, what we can do now is, like I said, I'm going to go through the whole book, and there's a bit of a bridging part here. Now, I hope Maria, because last time she read the whole of the Phaedo, I think, or someone did. Hope someone's reading the whole book. It'd be great to see if someone did. But if you're not, I'll just give you the bridging stuff. And here there is some interesting stuff. I didn't think it was a good thing to read for the class, but it is interesting stuff. It's good, and maybe you want to go back and have a look at it, especially because we've got a lot of women in our group. Okay, because this is where Plato is presenting quite radical stuff about women and the family. And as we all know, the structure of the society at the time, you had the slaves at the bottom, who were often, you know, like captured enemies, or way back, or whatever else, or captured foreigners. And then you have the women in the family very much out of the public sphere, out of the courts, out of the Senate, and out of the public space generally. So Plato had very radical views on this. So what actually happens is he goes into this theme that I just mentioned, which is the theme of Book 8, right? Where he talks about, I'm going to talk about bad forms of government. So we'll get to that right at the end. But then he's brought back, and they sort of say to him, well, hang on a sec, you know, you brought up this thing about women and the family, and you didn't really explain it. It's quite a radical proposal. So can you explain it a bit more? And so then he jumps into this whole section, firstly about women, and Socrates proposed that they should be treated just like men, and that especially in terms of the selection to be the guardians or the auxiliaries. And Socrates is then challenged by one of the, I can't remember who, probably Glaucon, to say, well, hang on, didn't you say that everyone should be play their role according to their abilities? And aren't women different from men? And Socrates goes, well, women are different from men, but exactly in what way are they different? And how is that important to what we're discussing? So he comes up with two reasons, two perhaps relevant ways in which women are different from men. So their role with family is that women do the mothering and men do the fathering. And of course, the mothering role, especially young, is very important. Now, the other way in which women are different from men is that men are physically stronger, generally speaking. So these are the only ways in which they should be treated differently. And in his Republic, he's totally reducing the motherly role, or at least socializing the motherly role. So he's taking a lot of the motherly role out of the hands of individual mothers. So they wouldn't have to spend their lives necessarily doing that, especially if they were selected to be a guardian. So the children will be brought up in common, and there's even wet nurses and all that sort of thing. And they won't even know their biological parents. So this leaves it just childbirth as being, and the early days as being important after childbirth. And most women, most of the time, aren't having babies. So they can do other things. So women can be selected for military training, women can be selected for philosophy training equally with the men. And then there's just the acceptance that there's a difference in perhaps physical strength, although women will go to the gymnasium and train beside the men. Okay, so that's the women question, if you like. And then the broader thing, which we've already addressed, is the family, and it's this real. It's like the kibbutz, in the Jewish in the Israel in the early days, and perhaps like some sort of hippie or Soviet even manifestations where the family is abolished. And the child rearing and everything is a social responsibility. So now, so there will be no pairing off into married couples, and there'll be very much, there's descriptions in here of kind of a eugenics program where, and there's a comparison with the breeding of dogs. So you breed your dogs by breeding the best with the best. So if you want to breed the best leaders, you've got to breed the best people with the best people. And so there's this funny stuff about, so the rulers will actually decide who mates with who, and they'll have these sex festivals, and where they're orchestrated so that they ensure that, you know, the right people mate with the right people. And then battle heroes will be offered sex as a reward. So it's all this amazing stuff in there that might be interesting to read if you want to think. You know, this is 2,400 years ago this stuff was being written. So just one comment to make about that. Why was Plato so interested in abolishing the family? You know, why was this something that he really saw as important and had to set up all this structure in order to get rid of it? Well, there's the benefits that he sees in the structure that he put in place, but he was also concerned about the current structure of tribes and families in Greek society and in Athens especially, where family allegiances, family loyalties had a very strong influence on the politics and who took certain roles and all that sort of thing. And he thought, well, if I get rid of all that, then I can bring through meritocratic systems and all that. So that's my only defense. You might find some other defenses there, but that was one of the main reasons that that it comes across that he wanted to abolish the family. All right, and just at the end of the section, there's also a small, quite a large section about the rules of war. And probably the main thing to draw out there, again, coming probably out of the Peloponnesian Wars, is that Plato did see war as an inevitable part of society, you know, that we are going to go to war, it's always going to happen. But he was pushing very hard that Greeks should not annihilate other Greeks. So there should be kind of rules of war, because otherwise, if Greek societies annihilate each other, then they become weak to their mutual enemies who could then take them over. So he was sort of talking about rules like don't take slaves from other Greeks, and don't do looting when you win a battle. Well, at least you can do some looting, but don't do too much looting. So, yeah. So that's the bridging section before we get to today's reading. So has anyone got any questions about that? Women and families and.
Yes, I've got a question.
Okay.
You know, with his ideas about society and women, is there any chance that he could have been reminiscing about the Amazon society, because there was a period of integration between the Hellenes and the Amazons, and as we know, the Amazons, you know, matriarch, and they sort of had that, you know, where the children were raised in a community like a kibbutz, and the men were invited every full moon and so on. Is there any chance that, you know, that some of that history, you know, had an influence on his thoughts?
Perhaps, Kula. I actually don't know anything about that. So I wonder if anyone else wants to talk about the Amazons and their relationship with Greece and Plato at the time. No, it's something I can look up, Kula.
Actually, I think by the time Plato came along, the complete integration had already occurred.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I do remember reading some notes. It might have even been the notes in the Penguin or something about how there were other proposals for certainly for a different role for women, women in the military and that sort of thing, and that some of these ideas were in Sparta. You know, there was that people living in barracks and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it might also be Sparta as well in other parts of Greece. Yeah. Okay.
Bernie, sorry, Bernie, can I just ask a quick question? Can you hear me, Bernie?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep, off you go.
Was Plato married?
Yes.
Oh, he was married. Did he have children?
Yes.
And he's still against family?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
And he was from an important family in Athens too. His family was quite important, and he would have been expected to go on and have a big public life career, which he chose not to.
I didn't know that. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I presumed always that Sparta was a matriarchal society and Athens was a patriarchal society. So it's somebody having lived in a patriarchal society trying to understand what's happening in the matriarchal society as well, which may have some, you know, lost in translation stuff happening.
Yeah. Well, that sounds. I actually didn't know that Sparta was matriarchal. That's very interesting. Yeah. So it's not, you know, perhaps in Athens, his proposal was quite radical, but maybe not so radical across the city-states of ancient Greece.
There were women in Pericles' time that had reached prominence, like Aspasia. So probably that had influenced Plato. But in that last section, Bernie, it was very interesting to read that. What he says about children, that they should attend war and they should accompany them, the women and the men in war. But of course, if the elders think that it's too much, maybe sometimes it can be avoided. And the interesting thing, have a horse so they can be in horseback, so they can. They can flee if the need comes, but also how the dead heroes are going to act as a conduit between the gods and the living. And yes, about the abolition of slaves, that you shouldn't have slaves, and you shouldn't be stripping corpses, and you shouldn't even put to temple the weapons of your enemies. But it was Greek. Like, you shouldn't have Greek slaves. I'm not so. I mean, the book says the Hellenes. So if what about Persians? Is it all right to have Persian slaves or foreigners? It's not very clear. Do you know anything about that, Bernie?
Well, someone asked last week, I think, or maybe in the other group, about yeah, it was last week. That's right, about whether there would be slaves in the Republic. And I remember thinking, yeah, like it's not specifically addressed, but it's indirectly addressed. And here's the example. Like if you say you shouldn't take Greek slaves, well, then it's okay to take barbarian slaves, isn't it? And it's okay to loot and to destroy all their crops and all that sort of thing. Which, by the way, Mary's once again showing that she's read between the readings, you know, here. So there were a lot of things that Mary just mentioned there that I skipped over about the rules of war. So, I mean, we can think about this in terms of like Geneva Convention and that sort of thing. You know, Plato's trying to say, well, look, you know, if we're going to have war, we've got to have rules about it so that, you know, we just, yeah, there's limits. Yeah.
I think it's fair enough to have Persian slaves.
Careful, Paul. Some of my best friends are Persians. I say that with sincerity. I love Persians, yeah. But yeah, they'd probably make good slaves too. Yeah. Okay, anyone?
I actually found it very interesting that he didn't include the slaves as part of the groups. So he's got 3 groups, and just continuing the comparison to the Hindu caste system, they had 4 groups, and they had a slave group, and they included it, whereas he's deliberately left it out. And I think...
Well, I just think as they're not, you know, from their point of view, they're not in society. And really the same as donkeys aren't in society. They're just not in society, you know. I think that's probably the view, which is probably difficult for us to accept, but I think that's what he's talking about. When they talked about democracy in Athens, of course, you know, or you think of the Constitution of America, you know, the liberty and everything, you know, I mean, that was written when they still had slaves, right, before the Civil War, you know, so black people weren't included in all those things about, you know, equality and stuff. So I think it's that sort of thing. Well, it's the way I suggest it is.
He didn't really have a concept of affirmative action, did he?
Affirmative action. Well, did he? Did he?
Well, he kind of doesn't give him a chance to get out of the slave group.
No, not the slave. Oh, sorry, I was thinking in terms of women. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah,
no.
Slaves. No, not a chance. Yeah. Another comment on women in Plato. There's important figures, female gods, and references to the feminine. And one particular one will come up in the symposium if people end up doing Platonic love, where the height, the peak of the conversation in the symposium is a dialogue between Socrates, and well, he recounts a dialogue at the drunken, you know, party, the drinking party. He recounts a conversation he has with, is it Demetina or something, who's like this demigod, goddess, who teaches about love, which is really weird because the whole setting is totally homoerotic.
Actually, there was a little homoerotic piece in this piece that we just read, where he talks about, you know, this I think Glaucon's love of handsome young men, which you know, a few people should read that today.
Yeah, great. Maybe that's a great segue, Caller. We'll see how we go if anyone else wants to. But yes, that's right. I was going to skip over that as well. I'm not sure how much people were
No,
interested in that. Yeah.
I think that I think it's very significant to think that that the sexualities were acknowledged.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And it was integrated into his segue into a new topic there. So I'll try to remember when I go through it here and add it in. So do we want to get on to this week's reading, or has anyone got any final comments? No. Okay. Okay. So the reading starts with the question, or the heading for this discussion is, what is the philosopher? What is a philosopher? And the way we get to that is the question of whether the republic is practically possible. So, okay, you've given this ideal society, we've got a big picture of it now, but is it actually possible? And so now we're getting back into themes that we did with the Phaedo last time, which is the theory of forms. So this is where the theory of forms is now coming in for the first time into the Republic. It's coming in a fairly mild way, and it'll come in full on when we go to the allegory of the caves. So the way he brings it in, he says, well, this is an ideal, right? Ideal as in the words, one of the words we translate as form. So this is a form, like an insensible ideal. And it's that the way we use it, you know, where we say this is an ideal that we can strive towards. So perhaps we won't ever get to it, but we need to aspire to it. And so then he says, well, look, you know, someone asks, well, you know, what is the single change that we could make to bring ourselves towards this ideal? And the answer is that a philosopher becoming king, or a king becoming a philosopher. So if we got someone into that role, if somehow that happened, so they were the ruler of society and they were a philosopher, however you got there, then that would be the start, because then society could start to be transformed. And I'll just read out the section where he says this, because this kind of is nice and orientating. So this is 473 around D in whatever translation you've got. But you don't have to read it. I'll just read it out just for future reference. The society we have described can never grow into a reality or see the light of day, and there will be no end to the troubles of state, or indeed of humanity itself, until philosophers become kings in the world, or until those we now call kings and rulers really and truly become philosophers, and political power and philosophy thus come into the same hands, while the many natures now content to follow either to the exclusion of the other are forcibly debarred from doing so. So there's the political realm and the philosophy realm, and they don't mix at the moment. This is what I have hesitated to say so long, knowing what a paradox it would sound. For it is not easy to see that there is no other road to real happiness, either for society or for the individual. So it's funny, isn't it? You know, I suppose if you were an engineer, you'd probably say engineers should rule the world, and philosophers say philosophers should rule the world. So who's surprised about that? So this brings us into the question of what is a philosopher? And the answer to the question brings us to the theory of forms, as we've seen in the Phaedo, which was an earlier text, right? So or just revise the theory of forms. So remember how beautiful things are considered to participate in absolute beauty, right? And remember that the forms were in the form of opposites. So you had beauty, not beauty, ugly if you like, just, unjust, happy, unhappy. So a beautiful thing is not perfectly beautiful. So in some ways it also participates the ugly. Likewise, a just society is never perfectly just. That is just an ideal. So what we want is to find the conditions under which a practical republic can be most closely approximate the ideal. And so here he's talking about ideal in that sense that we're talking about, and bringing it to his theory, we normally talk about, and bringing it to his theory of forms. So if society is ruled by rulers who orientate themselves towards the forms, then this will be a just society, a beautiful society, and everything else, because the rulers can orientate the society to ideal justice, ideal goodness, and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the first step. The next step is this stuff about knowledge and opinion. And again, this relates to what we were talking about in the Phaedo. I'm going to go through it all again, but I'm just reminding you of this stuff that we did earlier with the forms. It relates to that. So the philosopher, who should be the ruler, loves to observe the truth. They love to turn attention to what is. The truth is in the form of opposites. And do we remember, I think one thing that really hit home for people was when we talked about the island and the sea. So when you say island, right, you say, and you define island, the island, you can't understand an island without the sea, because the sea is the border of the island. If there was no sea, there would be no island. So the forms are always like this, no matter what they are. They have the form of they have their opposite in the same. The same, the other is in the same, some people say that. So when you define island, when you think of island, you say island, but you actually mean island, not sea. So people remember that stuff at all? Yeah, some people? Okay, because this is important when we get to this stage. So when we get back to the opinion versus knowledge thing, so some folks just see the beautiful thing, the just thing. They're not actually orientated towards the ideal. And that he calls opinion, okay? And this will relate this again to Plato pointing up and Aristotle pointing down, okay? So it's like opinion is when you see that the essence of beauty, is, if you like, is in beautiful things, and you don't realize that that beauty or that justice or whatever comes from the ideal. And he kind of gives he says that this is like, that like they're blind to the ideal, and he says it's like being asleep and dreaming, and that philosophers are awakened to the forms, okay, awakened to reality. And we use these metaphors all the time. We've got enlightenment, he uses light later with the cave, and being awake. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is where the origins of that expression that some people might know that is used these days, being woke, someone is woke in young political terminology. So it's being awake rather than dreaming and being asleep. Now, then the next step, it's very formalistic here. So remember our opposites, island and sea, and that sort of thing. So let me see how I can explain it. So beauty is any beautiful thing is a mixture between beauty and not beauty. So it's a mixture between a being, the being of beauty, and a relative negation, not being. Now, ignorance is related to absolute negation. But any particular beautiful thing or any particular just society or whatever has a mixture of being and not being. And so what he says is that you've got ignorance at one extreme, which is just the abyss, if you like, a total ignorance, total non-being, nothing. And then at the other extreme, you've got the pure forms and being attending to and seeing the pure forms. And in between is this kind of mixture. And so those opinions are this kind of people who can only see the mixture but can't see the pure form. Okay, I think we can get back to that in the discussion, but hopefully that's explained that. So maybe we'll have a discussion, and then I can bring in my little Russian dolls again a bit later. But okay, so any questions about that?
On the topic of modern slang, sort of relating to Plato, I thought while reading the part where he said to mind one's own business, to do, your craft the best and not to meddle in other people's craft. That's kind of similar to a modern term like you do you. Have you ever heard someone say that? You do what you do, basically, but instead you just say you do you.
That's why we've got you here, Angus. Thank you. That's great. You do you. Okay.
That's one of the things that causes me the most problems with Plato, because, things like, not to be predictable, but if you go back to Nazi, Germany, the soldiers always said, I did what I had to do. I didn't question somebody else. So, and then I can see the importance of, everyone's freaking out and everyone's got an opinion about COVID. And you think, well, everyone's got the position that they hold. And, we have a captain of the ship and we've got to follow the captain because we're in stormy waters. So both sides can be true. It's a really difficult one to navigate, so to speak.
Is it a liberal society?
What do you mean? Which society are you referring to, Bernie?
I just mean the whole idea of liberalism, the post-Enlightenment idea of liberalism, like personal freedom, I don't know.
I understood it that Plato believes that you will find the freedom or the justice, which, for some reason I'm equating as a higher virtue with freedom, when you actually look at your role and don't look at the other's role. So I think Shakespeare said something similar too, like, carry your, anyway, I can't remember the quote, but there's a lot of evidence in our lifetime that would suggest that you can have your role, but you've got to question how you play that role and what orders you get from people, say, in the auxiliary or the guardians, if you're the ordinary person, so to speak. So in my head, I've never thought that if I was the ordinary person, I would not question the guardian, or I just can't comprehend that kind of world, basically.
You sort of drawing an analogy to today where people, for example, people need to be protected, but there are those who don't care about, they care more perhaps about their own freedoms and parties, and they need to and is it right to to give freedom to every desire?
I was actually deliberately avoiding about speaking about today's situation because it's so convoluted and complex. I was more referring to, you know, like I grew up through my education, like our Australian education system, learning to question. And part of that questioning was always questioning authority. So I believe in both. I believe that we are giving a role. If you're going to be a patient in a hospital, you're a patient and there's a doctor, but I also believe that you have the right to question and find out for yourself what the doctor's doing.
Sorry, what was that again? You right to find out.
I grew up believing both sides, that yes, you have a role, you have your role to do. And Angus, if you can repeat it, your exact words. Was it Angus that said it? Or I'm not sure who. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, it was Angus. Yeah.
Yeah. You're given a role and you find happiness and freedom playing that role and not looking at what other people's role is. But I actually grew up with one foot on each camp, so to speak. One foot in yes, I accept that, and the other foot is no, I will damn well question that to the full extent that I can.
Okay, thanks, Evie. I'll just throw a couple more things in, and it would be good to hear from other people who haven't spoken yet. What's Effie seeing there is a very common thing in reading The Republic. And the two things, firstly, that it's not really about freedom, and I would say not a liberal society, and that's a bad thing. And so there was one famous recent philosopher, a philosopher of science actually, called Karl Popper, who is famous for his falsification methodology in science, which some people involved in science might know about. You put up a hypothesis and then you try to falsify it. But he wrote on social matters as well. He came from Austria and he was a refugee and went and lived in New Zealand. And he wrote a book called Free Society and Its Enemies, I think it was called. But he was certainly very scathing of Plato and the Republic, and saying that it described, I think he would have said, a fascist society. And so, yeah. So, yeah. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet want to have a bit of a contribution here about what sort of society we're looking at?
I'm just, while people are thinking, I just like this particular. Please don't associate this with me personally, but I like this paragraph where it says, I hardly expected that answer from you, Glovcon. I replied, anyone as susceptible as you should surely remember that those of your amorous temperament are always getting bitten with a passion for boys in the bloom of youth and think they all deserve attention and affection. I mean, I just think it's so great to read something like this that was written 2,500 years ago. And here we are, people are still struggling with, you know, with the, how shall we say, the complexities of human nature and the complexities of our own sexualities.
Yes, well, I mean, that was a fairly specific and ritualized, to a certain extent, sexuality in Athens. I'm not sure how much it is across Greece. Yeah, where older men would take young boys under their wing, and sometimes, you know, there would be sex involved, but there would also be a mutual exchange, like education and mentoring and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a really big thing. And so the way, I forgot, sorry, to integrate it, but the way it was used was saying, well, come on, Glaucon, I know how much you love youth, basically. And, you know, you might be in love with a man, but he might have a big nose, but you say, oh, that's endearing. Or he might have pale cheeks, but you say, because you're in love with the whole thing. And so he was using that to say, well, philosophers just aren't into the ideal of justice or the ideal of beauty. They're into all ideals, the whole lot of them. So they're into the form. And as we move along, we'll go from all the different forms to the absolute form, which will be called the form of the good here. So yeah, so that's how he did that playful thing on Glaucon's love of boys. Yeah.
So, sorry, Bernie, can I ask a quick question? I want to take away your... Is there a difference between reading Plato and Republican Greek compared to English? Obviously, you know, I mean, I sometimes feel that we lose the essence, not with any book, with any novel. You know, imagine reading the Republic in Greek, the language that was originally written, compared to reading it in all these translations. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Bernie, and others? You know, do we lose that essence? You know, I mean, we can read this book, but 500 times, but imagine reading it in the actual language.
Well, it'd be great. I mean, I can't read ancient Greek, so I can't really answer that question, what it's like. I read it with the English on one side and the Greek on the other in the Lerb editions, in these editions here. So I can follow it a little bit in the Greek. But maybe, I know that some people here learnt ancient Greek at school, like Maria, you did, didn't you? You got anything down there?
Yes, yes, I did. I mean, but we have to remember that ancient Greek is almost a totally different language. I mean, the characters, the alphabet is the same, and some it is different, and the syntax is different, and then you have dialects, and there is a different dialect used in Sparta, and the writing, the Doric writing is different to the Ionic, to the Athenian or the Attica writing, and things like that. But I am like you, Bernie. I like reading the English and have the ancient Greek text next to it, because some terminologies I can grasp better in the original Greek. For example, some words for knowledge, which is gnosi, and episteme. And it's interesting about episteme, because episteme in modern Greek is science, or somebody who has, actually the word stands up. He has a really good grasp of things, or doxa, which is opinion, and another word for opinion. So yeah, it's an interesting point that you're bringing about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, other words that are important for us are a logos, which we've already mentioned, which just is translated in so many different ways. And then in mathematics means ratio. So translate well, rational ratio translates into Latin quite well. Another one we've dealt with is psyche, psyche, and we're trying to leave that as call it psyche, which is just as close, or as close as we can get compared to soul. So the way it went with psyche, it went to anima in Latin, and then from Latin to English it went to soul, but anima actually is probably closer to psyche, the original psyche, than soul is, and soul has a lot of medieval connotations for us. So there's that one. There's other ones like I say dunamis, power, translated as power. That comes up a lot, and it's really hard to understand exactly what they meant by that in the different contexts. In terms of the theory of forms, I mean, this is a bit of a problem reading this Penguin translation, is that the words for forms, like one of the words is at the origin of our word idea, and then there's another couple of words that are used. Sometimes it's just translated as class, or, I could think of lots of translations. So forms and the translations of logos, yeah, you have to really pay attention to those sorts of things if you want to get the sort of reading that we're going to be doing.
What book do you have, Bernie? You said, what book did you use? Because I wouldn't mind buying.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, so used to be in the UK, and then it went to Harvard, I think. They're called Loeb, L-O-E-B. And they have, the red ones are the Latin classics and the green ones are the Greek classics. So Plato's all in the green ones, of course, and that's just give you an example.
So it's got a Greek and English, yeah.
Yeah, it's got the Greek and English, and it's fairly it's fairly in sync, you know. Okay. I mean, the best one for us non-Greek readers is I've got an interlinear New Testament, which is amazing. I love that, where you you actually have the literal translation of every word directly underneath the Greek, and then down the side it has the King James, which is a bit of a shame really, but it has King James translation down the side, so you can really see what's going on very fast. You get this kind of literal, you don't have to look up the dictionary, you just get this literal translation of each word, and then you see how it actually can be formed into an English sentence, so that's fine. But these ones, yeah, just side by side. So for those people who of course know the script, you could very quickly get into reading it in this way, and if you're really keen, you know, I mean, not for this class, but if you're really keen on Plato, that's the way to go. If you,
I actually realised the importance of the Greek when I'm actually writing a book, and one of the things that I'm learning is show and don't tell. So if I'm going to sort of write that I'm sad, I start describing the day, that it's a gloomy day and it's a rainy day. And Plato sort of did the same thing. So he starts the Republic at the port, and at a port you go on a journey, Borea. So the whole thing is that the book is an aporia, question. So it's a play on words of the journey and the questioning. So he describes, he's showing and not telling in the same way that you kind of miss when you translate.
I was just agreeing with you there. If you look, it's really interesting that you're onto that. I mean, that's a big thing for me, and show and tell, which we can talk about. Recent philosopher Wittgenstein made a big thing of this. Basically, what it is for me is it's showing a distinction between linguistic method, logical method, and Platonic method, so mathematics. So, so just quickly to give the difference for other people who aren't interested as much as Effie and I, my example would be one that I've used in this class previously, which is to say two Russian dolls expresses two, shows two pebbles shows two anything shows two, right? It doesn't say two. Saying two is like giving a definition or whatever else. So I can show you how to ride a bike without using any words at all, right? Or I could write with subject, predicate, and using logic and everything to tell you how to ride a bike, but which one would be better? So with modern philosophy is very much focused on linguistic and always trying to tell everything. And as Wittgenstein said, he said that all that is philosophical is showing. And so on that which you are showing, you must remain silent. So modern philosophy doesn't recognize the showing as being important. And what's going to happen beyond today is we're going to move into the allegorical section where Plato introduces images and uses those images to show us his formal theory. He's not telling us, he's not saying explicitly what it is, you know, what beauty is or whatever. He's showing. And so remember this kind of thing about the island also contains the sea. The island is the island and the sea. Now that's a contradiction. The island is the island and the sea. But we used an image for that. We drew it on the board. You've got an image in your head. Yeah, that's right. An island needs the sea. So when I say island, I always presume the sea. Everyone presumes the sea when they think of an island. That's a logical contradiction to say the island is the island and the sea, but you can show it. And we all show it, and we know it's not a contradiction. We all go, yeah, I know what you mean, Bernie. I hope we do. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. And Effie, that's great, because that is leading us into the allegorical section that we're now about to enter. So what are we doing next week? Why are philosophers not valued? That's the section. And this is where we move into, okay, so selecting the guardians, they need to have good characteristics, and then we need to educate them well. And we need to educate them in the forms. We need to orientate them, turn them around towards the forms. And let me share again so that we can, wait a minute, I'm not getting share screen working. Select window, is that it? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, and this takes us back to Raphael's School of Athens that we've come back to a lot, where Plato's saying that we need to turn around and look at the forms. We don't look down at what is the object of opinion, which is particular beautiful things or particular just things. We need to go look at the ideal, ineffable, absolute forms of things. So that's the education is leading towards. And this is where we go into the allegorical section. And I think Effie just mentioned one of the first allegories, which is the ship of state. This idea of the ship of state is the first allegory, and showing actually why the problems with democracy, some of which we might recognize in our particular situation in the Anglophone world. Right, so that will be the reading for next week. Yeah, okay. So how are we going for time? We haven't got much more time left. So I left a little bit out there, but we can come back to it about the opposites. We can spend more time about the forms and the opposites. Now, Angus, is that you with a lot of static again? Someone's giving me a lot of static here. Okay, I think it was, yeah. So anyone got any final questions about what we discussed today?
Did Plato ever specify how the rulers were chosen? The rulers are to be philosophers. That's sort of as far as it went today, right?
Right, yeah. So last week, probably, Angus, we spoke a little bit about it. It's basically, you know, you need to go around and you know, when you're starting it up anyway, selecting young children who show an aptitude, show all the qualities that are required. And as one of the things that he particularly said was, well, we need someone who is who's good for military, physical sort of stuff, as well as an aptitude for philosophy. So a quick learner, you know, like basically clever, that sort of thing. And then you train them up. I didn't mention, but what I often think the closest society to this that I know, other than maybe some totalitarian societies, is Tibetan society. And in Tibetan society, they'll go and select a little child, you know, somehow because, you know, they've been directed and they're the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama or the other lamas or whatever. And then they will train that child up to be their leader and train and train and train them over decades until they come to maturity, and then they have the wisdom, and then they lead. So that's the sort of process. But of course, in Plato's situation, there would be more than one leader. Okay. Anyone else before we finish?
Yeah, I just couldn't help reading this, thinking of modern politics, especially about modern leaders. The ruler, he will be self-controlled and not grasping about money. He has no touch of meanness. Pettiness of mind is quite incompatible with the constant attempt to grasp things divine or human as a whole and in the entirety. This is Trump, I think. You know?
It is Trump, or
It's, yeah, well, I'm being very, very sarcastic.
Oh yeah,
of
okay,
course,
yeah. No, that was a good answer.
mean,
That was a good answer, Maria, to Angus's question. Thank you for that. Yeah, that gives a good idea. Okay, I'm going to leave the screen on because we're trying to sort of make it feel a bit like we're actually in the same room or something. So if people will wind it up now if people want to leave, and look forward to next week when we get into this real allegorical section, and I'm sure you're going to find this really interesting. So that'll be next week's reading, and I think you'll really enjoy it, and we're going to have lots of fun from now on.
I'm just warning you, I've read the cave 5 times and I've struggled each time.
Okay. Okay, there's a challenge. There's a challenge. All right. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming, and stay on if you want, and but we'll see you. Otherwise, we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you, and
Have a good
bye-bye,
week,
Paloma.
everyone.
Thanks.
Everyone,
See you next
bye-bye.
week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Bernie.
Yeah.
Oh, bye, everyone. I found a pretty cool article here from University of Virginia.
Yeah.
Just talking about the different sort of ancient Greek terms for the mind.